The stars look different out here. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the human research vessel Pathfinder, watching the massive space station grow larger on the view screen. Aurora's edge was unlike anything humans had ever built. The station stretched for kilometers, its surface covered in gleaming metal that seemed to shift colors as they approached. First time seeing a Zephyrian construction captain, Dr. Lisa Kane joined him at the observation deck. Her voice carried a mix of excitement and nervousness that Jake understood completely. This was humanity's first real chance at joining the galactic community. First time seeing anything this big, Jake admitted. Back home, our biggest station could fit inside one section of that thing. Behind them, Ryan Cole was checking the ship systems one final time. The engineer had been quiet during the 3-week journey, spending most of his time studying what little information they had about the Zephyrian Alliance. Jake trusted Ryan's technical skills more than anyone else's, but the man's serious nature made him hard to read sometimes. All systems green, Captain, Ryan reported. Communications array is ready for whatever protocols they want to use. The Pathfinder was humanity's pride, but Jake knew it looked small next to the alien ships docked at Aurora's edge. Through the view screen, he could see vessels from different species. Some looked like living creatures with organic curves. Others appeared to be made of pure crystal. A few seemed to be held together by energy fields rather than solid materials. Incoming transmission, announced Lieutenant Amy Foster from the communication station. They're using standard galactic frequencies. Put it through, Jake ordered, straightening his uniform. This moment would be remembered in human history books. The view screen flickered, and an alien face appeared. The creature had smooth blue skin and large black eyes that seemed to look right through Jake. When it spoke, the universal translator converted its words into clear English. Human vessel Pathfinder, this is Dock Controller Hexton of Aurora's Edge. You are cleared for docking at Bay 7. High Coordinator Vextai will meet you in 1 standard hour. Thank you, Controller Hexton, Jake replied formally. We look forward to our meeting. The transmission ended, and Jake turned to his crew. Remember, we're not just representing ourselves here. Everything we do reflects on all of humanity. Lisa nodded, clutching her research tablet. I've reviewed the cultural briefings a dozen times. The Zephyrians value strength and intelligence above all else. They believe in natural hierarchies. What does that mean exactly? Amy asked. It means they think some species are naturally better than others, Ryan said quietly, like wolves being better hunters than rabbits. Jake didn't like the sound of that, but he kept his concerns to himself. Humanity needed this alliance. Earth's resources were running low, and the human colonies were scattered and vulnerable. The Zephyrian Alliance controlled trade routes and technology that could change everything for a species. The docking process was smooth but intimidating. Robotic arms guided the Pathfinder into a bay that could have held 10 ships their size. As they prepared to disembark, Jake noticed his crew checking their equipment nervously. Just remember, he told them, we might not be the strongest or the smartest species they've met, but we're here. That counts for something. The airlock opened, and they stepped into Aurora's Edge proper. The station's interior was even more impressive than its exterior. The corridors were wide enough for creatures much larger than humans. The walls displayed moving patterns that seemed to respond to the presence of different species. High Coordinator Vextai was waiting for them in the main reception area. The alien was tall and elegant, with the same blue skin as the dock controller, but bearing intricate tattoos that marked his high rank. Around him stood representatives from several other species, all watching the humans with obvious curiosity. Captain Morrison, Vextai said in perfect English, welcome to Aurora's Edge. I am High Coordinator Vextai of the Zephyrian Alliance. We are pleased to finally meet the species from the Sol system. Jake stepped forward and extended his hand in the human greeting gesture they had practiced. Vextai studied the outstretched hand for a moment before carefully mimicking the handshake. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us, Jake said. Humanity is eager to learn about the Alliance and find our place in the galactic community. Indeed, Vextai replied with what might have been a smile. Finding one's proper place is essential for harmony and progress. Come, There is something we must show you before we begin formal negotiations. The group moved through corridors filled with beings from across the galaxy. Jake tried not to stare, but it was impossible to ignore the incredible diversity. Some aliens floated rather than walked. Others moved on multiple legs, or seemed to glide along the walls. The Alliance consists of 12 species. Vextai explained as they walked. Each has found their proper role, based on their natural abilities and limitations. This system has brought peace and prosperity for over 1,000 years. They entered a vast chamber at the station's heart. In the center stood a device that took Jake's breath away. It was a three-dimensional display that stretched from floor to ceiling, showing what looked like a complex tree made of light. Countless branches connected different points, each one glowing with various colors and patterns. This is a predator hierarchy. Vextai announced proudly. It shows the natural order of all sentient species in our sector of the galaxy. Lisa stepped closer, her scientist curiosity overcoming her diplomatic caution. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "How does it work?" The hierarchy maps the hunting prowess, strategic thinking, and survival adaptability of every known species, explained a smaller alien with silver skin. "I am Researcher Kilvan. This system helps us understand how species interact and what roles they should play in our society." Ryan was studying the display with his engineer's eye for detail. Jake could see him taking mental notes of everything he observed. The man had an incredible memory for technical systems. Where would humans fit in this hierarchy? Jake asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Vextai gestured to a section near the middle of the display. "Based on our initial assessments, humanity would likely occupy this region. You show promise and adaptability, but your species lacks the raw power of the Krell or the intellectual capacity of the ethereals." Jake felt a flash of irritation, but kept his expression neutral. Lisa looked disappointed, while Ryan continued studying the display without comment. "Of course," Vextai continued, "this is merely a preliminary assessment. You will have time to study the hierarchy and understand your species' potential role in our alliance. Knowledge of one's place is a foundation of all successful cooperation." As Jake looked at the incredible display, he wondered what humanity had gotten itself into. The hierarchy was impressive, but something about the whole system felt wrong to him. He glanced at Ryan and saw that the engineer was frowning slightly as he studied the patterns of light. "We would be honored to learn more about the hierarchy," Jake said diplomatically. "When can we begin our detailed study?" "Tomorrow," Vextai replied. "Tonight, you are our guests. Rest and prepare yourselves. Understanding the hierarchy is not a task to be taken lightly." As they were escorted to their quarters, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this first meeting had revealed more questions than answers. The Zephyrians seemed friendly enough, but their obsession with natural hierarchies worried him. Humanity had always thrived by refusing to accept limitations. He just hoped that quality would serve them well in the challenges ahead. Jake woke up early in his assigned quarters, unable to shake the strange dreams that had plagued his sleep. The room was comfortable but alien, with furniture that adjusted automatically to his human proportions. Through the transparent wall, he could see the endless expanse of space dotted with ships from dozens of different worlds. A soft chime announced Lisa's arrival at his door. When it opened, he found both the companions waiting in the corridor, already dressed and ready for the day. "Couldn't sleep either?" Lisa asked, noting the tired look in Jake's eyes. "Too much to think about," he admitted. "Ryan, you've been quiet since yesterday. What's your take on all this?" The engineer was carrying a small notebook, something Jake had rarely seen him use, since Ryan usually kept everything in his head. "The hierarchy is more complex than they let on," Ryan said simply. "I want to see it again before I say more." They made their way to the central chamber, where Researcher Kilvan was waiting for them. The silver-skinned alien seemed genuinely excited to have new subjects to study. The humans arrive early," Kilvan noted approvingly. "This shows good discipline. The hierarchy responds well to focus attention." The massive display was even more impressive in the morning light. Colors shifted and flowed through the three-dimensional structure like living things. Jake could see hundreds, maybe thousands of connection points, each representing a different aspect of the species catalog within. "Before we begin," Jake said, "can you explain exactly what we're looking at?" I mean, how does this thing actually work? Kilvan gestured to a control panel that seemed to be made of the same flowing light as the display itself. The hierarchy is not merely a database, Captain Morrison. It is a living analysis system that has been growing and learning for over 12 centuries. Lisa stepped closer, her scientific training taking over. Learning how. Every interaction between species, every conflict, every cooperation, every trade agreement feeds data into the system. Kilvan explained. It analyzes behavioral patterns, psychological responses, and strategic capabilities. Over time, it has developed the ability to predict how species will behave in almost any situation. Ryan looked up from his notebook sharply. Predict? Yes, Engineer Cole. The hierarchy can forecast which species will form successful alliances, which will engage in conflict, and which will thrive or decline over time. This predictive capability has made the Zephyrian Alliance the most stable political entity in this sector of the galaxy. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. So, when you place humanity in the hierarchy, you're not just categorizing us. You're predicting our future. Precisely, Kilvan said with obvious pride. Would you like to see how the system works? Without waiting for an answer, the alien activated a section of the display. Suddenly, Jake could see detailed information about dozens of species he had never heard of. Some sections glowed bright green, while others pulsed with warning reds and yellows. The Krell, for example, Kilvan pointed to a massive red section near the top of the display. Powerful hunters, excellent warriors, but limited strategic thinking. They are useful for security and enforcement, but should never be placed in leadership positions. And ethereals? Lisa asked, pointing to a brilliant blue section that seemed to float above much of the rest. Highly intelligent, excellent planners, but physically weak and overly cautious. Perfect for research and analysis, but unsuited for rapid decision-making in crisis situations. Ryan was scribbling in his notebook, but Jake noticed the engineer's frown was getting deeper. What about species that don't fit neatly into categories? All species fit into the hierarchy, Engineer Cole. It is simply a matter of proper analysis and understanding. The system has never encountered a species it could not accurately categorize and predict. Never? Ryan asked quietly. Not once in 1,200 years, Kilvan said proudly. The hierarchy is perfect in its assessments. Jake exchanged glances with Lisa. Something in Ryan's tone suggested the engineer was seeing something the rest of them were missing. Can we see some of the older entries? Lisa asked, species that have been in the system for a long time? Of course. Kilvan manipulated the controls, and the display shifted to show historical data. Here, for instance, is the Melody civilization, added to the hierarchy 800 years ago. Jake studied the entry. The Melody were shown as a peaceful, artistic species with low military capability but high cultural value. What happened to them? They flourished for several centuries in their designated role as cultural ambassadors and artists. However, as predicted by the hierarchy, they eventually became too dependent on other species for protection and gradually lost their independence. Today, they exist only as a client species under ethereal guidance. The hierarchy predicted that? Lisa asked. Exactly as it occurred, Kilvan confirmed. The system identified their weakness centuries before it became apparent to anyone else. Ryan looked up from his notebook. Can I see the data on the Vorthan Empire? Kilvan seemed surprised by the request. How do you know about the Vorthans? They existed in a completely different spiral arm of the galaxy. I read about them in our historical databases, Ryan said calmly. Earth's deep space telescopes detected their civilization's light signatures before it went dark. Ah, yes. Kilvan manipulated the controls again. The Vorthans were added to the hierarchy 600 years ago when we encountered refugees from their collapse. A cautionary tale of what happens when a species refuses to accept their proper place in the natural order. The display showed the Vorthans as an aggressive, expansionist species that had tried to conquer their entire region of space. According to the hierarchy, their collapse was inevitable due to overextension and poor resource management. But Ryan was frowning at his notebook. That doesn't match what we observed, he said quietly. Excuse me? Kilvan asked. The light patterns we detected from the Vorthan region, Ryan explained. They suggested a highly advanced technological civilization that was developing sustainable energy sources and showing signs of population stability, not the resource-depleted empire your hierarchy describes. Kilvan looked uncomfortable for the first time since they had met him. Perhaps your observations were incomplete, Engineer Cole. The hierarchy's data comes from direct contact with Vorthan survivors. Maybe, Ryan said, but he didn't sound convinced. Jake decided to change the subject before things became too tense. What about current predictions? Can the hierarchy tell us about species we haven't met yet? Indeed it can. Kilvan seemed relieved to move to safer ground. Based on patterns of development and expansion, the hierarchy has identified several species that we will likely encounter within the next century. It even suggests optimal first contact protocols for each one. The aliens showed them predictions for 3 different species. One was described as highly aggressive and likely to require military containment. Another was predicted to be technologically advanced but socially fragmented, making them ideal targets for gradual assimilation into the Alliance. The third was forecast to be a peaceful trading civilization that would eagerly join the Alliance in a subordinate role. Has the hierarchy ever been wrong about these advanced predictions? Jake asked. Never significantly wrong, Kilvan said, though Jake noticed the qualifier. There are always minor variations, but the major patterns always hold true. Ryan closed his notebook with a sharp snap that seemed unnaturally loud in the vast chamber. I'd like to study the technical specifications, if that's possible. I'm afraid the hierarchy's core programming is classified, Kilvan said apologetically. However, you are welcome to continue observing its outputs and analysis methods. As they left the chamber, Jake could sense tension building in his small team. Ryan was clearly bothered by something he had seen, but the engineer was keeping his thoughts to himself for now. What do you think? Jake asked once they were back in the corridor. Lisa spoke first. It's incredible technology, but something feels off about the whole system. Too neat, too perfect. Ryan, Jake prompted. The engineer was quiet for a long moment. I need to see more data before I can say anything definitive, he finally said. But, Captain, I think we need to be very careful about what we agree to hear. Jake nodded, trusting Ryan's instincts even when he didn't understand them yet. We'll keep studying the system, but we won't make any commitments until we understand what we're really dealing with. As they walked back to their quarters, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's first contact with the galactic community was about to become much more complicated than anyone had expected. Ryan couldn't sleep again. For the 3rd night in a row, he found himself staring at the ceiling of his quarters, his mind racing through everything he had observed about the Predator hierarchy. The notebook beside his bed was filled with sketches and calculations, but something important was still missing from the picture. At 0400 station time, he gave up trying to rest and made his way back to the central chamber. The corridors were dimly lit during the night cycle, and most of the station's inhabitants were asleep. He expected to find the hierarchy chamber empty, but a soft glow from within suggested otherwise. He entered quietly and found Jake standing before the massive display, which was running some kind of automated analysis cycle. Colors flowed through the 3-dimensional structure in slow, hypnotic patterns. Can't sleep either? Jake asked without turning around. Too many questions, Ryan replied, joining his captain in front of the display. What about you? Lisa is right. Something feels wrong about all this. Jake gestured at the hierarchy. They've been using the system for over 1,000 years, making decisions about entire civilizations based on what it tells them. Ryan opened his notebook and began comparing his sketches to the current display. Jake, can I ask you something? Back on Earth, what made humans successful? I mean, why did we survive when so many other species didn't? Jake considered the question. Adaptability, I guess. When the environment changed, we found ways to change with it. We learned to use tools, to cooperate, to think our way around problems that were bigger than us. Exactly. Ryan pointed to a section of the hierarchy. But look at how this system categorizes species. It's all based on static traits. Hunting ability, intelligence level, physical strength. It treats these characteristics like they can never change. Jake looked more closely at the display. You're saying it doesn't account for adaptation? I'm saying it doesn't seem to understand what adaptation really means. Ryan flipped through his notebook. Look at the data on the Melody civilization. The hierarchy predicted they would become dependent and lose their independence, right? That's what Kilvan told us. But what if the hierarchy's own predictions influence that outcome? What if the Alliance treated the Melody as weak and dependent because the system said they were, and that treatment made them actually become weak and dependent? Jake felt a chill run down his spine. You're talking about a self-fulfilling prophecy. Maybe. Or maybe the system just doesn't understand that species can change their fundamental nature when they need to. Ryan showed Jake a sketch he had made of human evolutionary history. Humans started out as weak primates living in trees. According to the hierarchy's logic, we should have stayed weak primates. But we didn't. Before Jake could respond, they heard footsteps in the corridor. Lisa entered the chamber, looking as tired as they felt. Couldn't sleep, she said simply. What are you two discussing? Ryan explained his concerns about the hierarchy's static view of species development. Lisa listened carefully, occasionally asking questions about specific technical details. You know, she said when Ryan finished, there's something else that's been bothering me. Yesterday, Kilvan showed us predictions about species we haven't met yet. But how can the system predict the behavior of species it has never observed? Good question, Ryan said. I've been thinking about that too. He manipulated his own notes, showing them a pattern he had identified. Look at these three predicted species. The aggressive one, the fragmented one, and the peaceful traders. Don't they seem familiar? Jake studied Ryan's analysis. They're almost identical to species already in the hierarchy. Exactly. The aggressive species matches the profile of the Krell. The fragmented one is basically a copy of the Helix Consortium. And the peaceful traders are just like the Tanari. Lisa caught on immediately. The system isn't predicting new species. It's just repeating old patterns. Which means, Ryan continued, it might not understand that species can develop in truly new ways. It can only imagine variations on things it has already seen. They spent the next hour going through Ryan's notes systematically. The engineer had been memorizing not just the hierarchy's current state, but also tracking how it changed over time as new data was fed into it. His exceptional memory for technical details was revealing patterns that the system's own creators seemed to have missed. Here's what really bothers me, Ryan said, showing them a complex diagram. The hierarchy claims to be a learning system, but its core assumptions never change. It always categorizes species based on the same basic traits, always predicts the same types of outcomes. Like a computer program that can process new data, but can't change its fundamental programming, Jake observed. Exactly. And that might not be a problem if the fundamental programming was correct. But what if it isn't? Lisa was studying the display with new eyes. Ryan, you mentioned the Vorthan Empire yesterday. What exactly didn't match? Ryan pulled out a different section of his notebook. According to hierarchy, the Vorthans were aggressive expansionists who collapsed due to overextension and resource depletion. But the light signatures Earth observed suggested something completely different. Different how? The energy patterns we detected were consistent with a mature civilization that had solved its resource problems and stabilized its population. The kind of civilization that might have transcended the need for physical expansion. Jake frowned. So what happened to them? I don't know, but I don't think they collapsed the way the hierarchy claims they did. Ryan looked troubled. What if they just left, moved beyond physical space somehow, or found ways to exist that the hierarchy can't comprehend? That's a big leap, Lisa said, but she didn't sound dismissive. Maybe. But consider this. The hierarchy bases its understanding on refugees who survived the collapse. What if those refugees weren't representative of their species? What if they were the ones who chose not to transcend, who wanted to stay in physical space even as the rest of their civilization moved beyond it? The three humans stood in silence, contemplating the implications. If Ryan was right, the hierarchy wasn't just imperfect. It was fundamentally flawed in ways that could affect the development of every species that encountered it. There's something else, Ryan said quietly. I've been tracking the statistical patterns in the hierarchy's predictions, and there's a consistent bias. What kind of bias? Jake asked. It systematically underestimates the potential of species that don't fit its standard categories, and it overestimates the stability of species that do fit neatly into its hierarchy. Lisa was following his logic. So species that are naturally hierarchical and aggressive are predicted to be more successful than species that are cooperative or unconventional, which creates pressure for all species in the alliance to become more hierarchical and aggressive over time. Jake added grimly. Exactly. The system doesn't just predict the future. It shapes it by influencing how species are treated and what roles are allowed to play. They continued their analysis until the station's day cycle began and other beings started moving through the corridors. As they prepared to return to their quarters, Jake made a decision. Ryan, I want you to keep studying the system, but be discreet about it. Don't let them know how much you're learning. Are you thinking about challenging their assessment of humanity? Lisa asked. I'm thinking about a lot of things, Jake replied. But first, I want to understand exactly what we're dealing with. If this system is as flawed as Ryan thinks it is, we need to be very careful about how we proceed. As they left the chamber, Ryan took one last look at the Predator hierarchy. The massive display continued its endless dance of lights and patterns, beautiful and hypnotic. But now he could see the rigid structure underneath the flowing surface, the fixed assumptions that kept it from truly understanding the species it claimed to analyze. Somewhere in the back of his mind, an idea was beginning to form. It was audacious, probably impossible, and definitely dangerous. But if he was right about the hierarchy's flaws, humanity might have an opportunity to change not just their own fate, but the fate of every species in the galaxy. He just needed to figure out how to prove his theory without getting them all thrown out of the Alliance before they had a chance to make their case. Ryan spent the morning in the station's archives, officially researching human integration protocols, but actually diving deeper into the historical records of every species the hierarchy had cataloged. His exceptional memory was proving invaluable as he began to construct a mental map of the system's development over centuries. The archives were vast, containing detailed records of first contact scenarios, integration processes, and long-term species assessments. Most aliens would need weeks to process this much information, but Ryan's mind worked differently. He could absorb technical details and cross-reference patterns in ways that even impressed the archival systems. Engineer Cole, came a familiar voice behind him. You are quite dedicated to your research. Ryan turned to find High Coordinator Vextai approaching his study station. The tall alien moved with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. High Coordinator, Ryan replied respectfully. I believe understanding the system thoroughly will help humanity find our proper place in the Alliance. Admirable, Vextai said, settling into a chair designed for his species' anatomy. Researcher Kilvan tells me you've been asking very detailed questions about the hierarchy's methodology. Ryan chose his words carefully. The system is incredibly sophisticated. I'm trying to understand how it achieves such accurate predictions. Indeed, it is sophisticated. But tell me, Engineer Cole, what is your assessment of humanity's likely placement in the hierarchy? The question was clearly a test. Ryan pretended to consider carefully while his mind raced through the implications of various possible answers. Based on what I've observed, humans seem to fall into the middle ranges for most traditional metrics, Ryan said finally. We're not the strongest or the smartest species, but we show good adaptability. A reasonable assessment, Vextai agreed. And you accept this placement? I'm still learning about the system, Ryan replied diplomatically, but I can see how it would provide stability for the Alliance. Vextai studied Ryan for a long moment. You are more thoughtful than many species we encounter. Most are eager to argue for higher placement in the hierarchy, based on pride rather than realistic assessment. After the High Coordinator left, Ryan returned to his research with renewed focus. Something about Vextai's questions suggested the Zephyrians were watching the human team more closely than they had initially indicated. His afternoon session yielded a breakthrough that made his blood run cold. Deep in the historical archives, he found records of species that had been removed from the hierarchy entirely. Not extinct species, but civilizations that had been classified as systematic errors and deleted from the database. The quantum dancers, for example, had been a species that existed partially outside normal space-time. When they began demonstrating abilities that contradicted the hierarchy's predictions about physical limitations, they were reclassified as a measurement anomaly, and their records were archived away from the main system. The Synthesis Collective had been a group of species that had voluntarily merged their consciousness into a single entity while maintaining individual identities. When this cooperation proved more effective than the hierarchy predicted, they were classified as no longer qualifying as distinct species and removed from active analysis. Pattern after pattern emerged of species that had transcended the hierarchy's categories only to be explained away or ignored rather than forcing the system to evolve its understanding. Ryan's hands were shaking slightly as he copied the final data into his notebook. The hierarchy wasn't just biased. It was actively resistant to information that challenged its core assumptions. Any species that developed in ways the system couldn't predict was simply defined out of existence. That evening, Ryan found Jake and Lisa in the station's recreational area, trying to appear relaxed while surrounded by dozens of alien species. He caught Jake's eye and nodded toward a quieter corner. "We need to talk," Ryan said quietly once they had moved away from the crowd. "I found something big today." He explained his discoveries as carefully as possible, aware that they were still being observed by Alliance members. Jake and Lisa listened with growing alarm as Ryan described the pattern of species being removed from the hierarchy when they didn't conform to its predictions. "You're saying the system erases any evidence that contradicts its assumptions?" Lisa asked. "Worse than that," Ryan replied. "I think it actively discourages species from developing in ways that would challenge those assumptions. Look at the integration protocols." He showed them his analysis of how new species were introduced to the Alliance. Each species was assigned a specific role based on their initial hierarchy assessment, given resources and opportunities that reinforced that role, and gradually shaped to fit their designated place in the galactic order. "It's brilliant in a horrifying way," Ryan continued. "The system doesn't just predict what species will become, it makes them become what it predicts." Jake was studying Ryan's notes with the strategic mind of a career military officer. This explains why the Alliance has been so stable. They're not managing different species. They're controlling them. "The question is," Lisa said, "what happens when they try to control us?" Ryan looked around the recreational area, observing the subtle social dynamics between different species. The Krell stood apart, clearly marked as warriors and enforcers. The ethereals clustered together, obviously valued for their intelligence but kept separate from practical decision-making. Each species had been slotted into a role and seemed to accept it completely. "I don't think humans will accept being slotted," Ryan said finally. "Our whole evolutionary history is about refusing to accept limitations." "Which means we're going to be seen as a threat to the system," Jake concluded. They spent the rest of the evening discussing options, but every path seemed to lead to the same conclusion. Humanity could accept a subordinate role in the hierarchy and gradually lose their independence, or they could challenge the system and risk being classified as a systematic error themselves. Late that night, Ryan was alone in his quarters when the idea hit him like a lightning bolt. He sat up in bed, his mind suddenly racing with possibilities. The hierarchy was flawed, but it was also incredibly complex. Kilvan had mentioned that it had been growing and learning for 12 centuries, accumulating vast amounts of data and developing intricate predictive algorithms. The system was so sophisticated that even its creators probably didn't fully understand how it worked anymore. But Ryan was beginning to understand it. His exceptional memory had allowed him to map the system's structure and identify its blind spots. More importantly, he could see where the system could be corrected. The hierarchy's fundamental flaw wasn't in its data processing. It was in its underlying assumptions about how species develop and interact. Those assumptions were built into the system's core architecture, but they weren't unchangeable. They were just programming, and programming could be rewritten. Ryan spent the rest of the night working through the implications. What he was contemplating was unprecedented, probably impossible, and certainly dangerous. But if he was right about the system's vulnerabilities, he might be able to do more than just challenge humanity's placement in the hierarchy. He might be able to fix the entire system. The technical challenges were enormous. The hierarchy was protected by security systems that had been refined over centuries. Its core programming was classified at the highest levels. Even accessing the data would require bypassing safeguards that no outsider had ever penetrated. But Ryan had one advantage that the system's designers had never anticipated. His human memory wasn't just exceptional, it was fundamentally different from how other species process information. Where alien minds might focus on specialized areas of expertise, Ryan's brain formed connections across completely different domains of knowledge. He had been unconsciously memorizing not just the hierarchy's outputs, but also its operational patterns, security protocols, and maintenance routines. Everything he had observed over the past few days was stored in perfect detail, cross-referenced in ways that revealed the system's hidden structure. As dawn approached on the station, Ryan closed his notebook and tried to get a few hours of sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and he needed to be ready. But for the first time since arriving at Aurora's edge, he felt a spark of hope. The Predator hierarchy claimed to be perfect, but Ryan could see its flaws with startling clarity. More importantly, he was beginning to understand how those flaws could be corrected. The only question was whether humanity would have the opportunity to prove their theory before the Alliance decided what to do with them. Jake woke to find an urgent message waiting on his quarters communication system. High Coordinator Vextai was requesting a formal meeting to discuss humanity's initial assessment and potential integration timeline. The message's tone was polite but firm. This wasn't really a request. He found Lisa and Ryan already awake and discussing something in low voices near the observation deck. Both looked tired but alert, and Ryan's notebook was open between them. Morning briefing? Jake asked as he joined them. Ryan's been up all night, Lisa said. Show him what you figured out. Ryan's notebook was filled with new diagrams and calculations. But what caught Jake's attention was a hand-drawn map of Aurora's edge station itself. I've been thinking about what makes humans different from the other species in the Alliance, Ryan began. Every species we've met seems to be specialized. The Krell are warriors. The Ethereals are thinkers. The Tenari are traders. Each one is extremely good at one thing. But humans, Jake prompted, humans are generalists. We're not the best at any one thing, but we're decent at everything. More importantly, we connect ideas across different domains in ways that specialized thinkers don't. Lisa pointed to one of Ryan's diagrams. He's mapped out how each species approaches problem-solving. The Ethereals use pure logic. The Krell use instinctive aggression. The Zephyrians use systematic analysis. And humans? Jake asked. We use whatever works, Ryan said simply. Logic when it makes sense. Instinct when we need it. Systematic analysis when we have time. Improvisation when we don't. We're not locked into any single approach. Jake studied the diagrams, beginning to see the pattern. You're saying our weakness is actually our strength. I'm saying the hierarchy can't properly categorize us because we don't fit into its specialized framework. It's tried to measure us against species that are optimized for specific environments and roles, but humans are optimized for change itself. Before Jake could respond, Amy Foster's voice came over the communication system. Captain, High Coordinator Vextai is requesting your immediate presence in the formal council chamber. Jake looked at his companions. Any last-minute advice? Ryan closed his notebook decisively. Don't accept their initial assessment. Ask for time to demonstrate human capabilities through practical tests rather than theoretical evaluation. What kind of tests? I'm not sure yet, but I have some ideas. The key is to show them what we can do rather than trying to explain it. The formal council chamber was intimidating by design. Representatives from all 12 Alliance species sat in a circular arrangement that emphasized the hierarchical nature of their society. High Coordinator Vextai occupied the highest position, with other species arranged in order their hierarchy ranking. Jake, Lisa, and Ryan were escorted to a platform in the center of the circle, clearly positioned as subjects being evaluated rather than equals participating in a discussion. Captain Morrison, Vextai began formally. The Alliance Council has completed its initial assessment of humanity based on your species' demonstrated capabilities and our analysis of your cultural and biological characteristics. Jake remained standing, projecting confidence he didn't entirely feel. We're honored by your attention, High Coordinator. The hierarchy places humanity at classification level 4.7, indicating moderate potential for alliance membership in supporting roles. Your species shows adequate adaptability and reasonable intelligence, suitable for resource extraction, planetary maintenance, and auxiliary services. Jake felt his jaw clench, but kept his expression neutral. Around the circle, various alien representatives nodded approvingly at this assessment. However, Vextai continued, their concerns about human unpredictability and tendency toward emotional decision-making. The hierarchy recommends a probationary period during which humanity will be closely supervised while integrating into Alliance society. What would this probationary period involve? Jake asked carefully. Researcher Kilvan spoke up from his position in the circle. Human colonies would be relocated to designated zones where your development could be properly guided. Your technological advancement would be regulated to prevent dangerous experimentation. Your governmental systems would be restructured to align with Alliance protocols. Jake exchanged quick glances with Lisa and Ryan. This wasn't integration, it was absorption. The hierarchy has never been wrong in its assessments, added another alien that Jake didn't recognize. Species that accept their proper place in the natural order thrive under Alliance guidance. Those that resist typically face difficulties. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Jake took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would determine humanity's fate. High Coordinator, we appreciate the Alliance's offer and the thoroughness of your evaluation. However, I believe the hierarchy may not have complete information about human capabilities. A ripple of surprise ran through the council chamber. Species didn't usually question hierarchy assessments. Are you suggesting the hierarchy is incorrect, Captain Morrison? Vextai's tone carried a warning. I'm suggesting it might be incomplete, Jake replied diplomatically. Human evolution followed a unique path that might not be fully captured by standard evaluation methods. Ryan stepped forward slightly. If I may, High Coordinator, human adaptation strategies are quite different from those of specialized species. We'd be happy to demonstrate these capabilities through practical evaluation rather than theoretical assessment. Kilvan looked intrigued despite himself. What sort of demonstration? Jake could see Ryan's mind working rapidly. Present us with a problem that requires multiple types of thinking. Strategic, technical, creative, and adaptive. Something that would normally require cooperation between several different species. Interesting, Vextai mused. And you believe humans could address such a problem independently? We believe humans could approach it in ways that might surprise you, Jake said carefully. The council members conferred among themselves in several different languages, their discussion creating a babble of alien sounds that the universal translator couldn't parse simultaneously. Finally, Vextai called for order. Very well, Captain Morrison. The Alliance will provide you with a practical challenge. You will have 48 hours to demonstrate human problem-solving capabilities. What kind of challenge? Lisa asked. A new alien rose from the circle, one Jake hadn't seen before. It was smaller than most of the others, with crystalline features that caught and refracted the chamber's light. I am Archivist Quintal of the Crystal Singers, the alien announced in a voice like wind chimes. 3 months ago, one of our research stations went dark in the Helix Nebula. It was investigating energy patterns that appear to violate several fundamental laws of physics. The station was staffed by a mixed crew from multiple species. Vextai added. Krell security specialists, ethereal researchers, Zephyrian coordinators, and others, each group contributing their specialized expertise. The station's automated systems are still functioning, Quintal continued, but all communication has ceased. The station appears to be intact, but something has happened to the crew. Previous rescue attempts have failed. Ryan was already taking notes. Failed how? The first rescue team, Krell Warriors, approached the problem as a security threat. They were repelled by energy discharges from the station itself. The second team, Ethereal Analysts, treated it as a research puzzle and became so absorbed in studying the phenomena that they lost contact with their support ships. The third attempt used Zephyrian protocols and systematic approach. Vextai added grimly. They established that the station is surrounded by energy fields that interact unpredictably with standard Alliance technologies. Their recommendation was to quarantine the site permanently. Jake could see where this was heading. And you want humans to solve a problem that 3 different specialized approaches have failed to address. Precisely, Vextai said. If humanity truly possesses these unique adaptive capabilities you claim, this should be an ideal demonstration opportunity. Lisa leaned forward. What resources will we have access to? A standard Alliance scout ship, basic scientific equipment, and whatever personnel you deem necessary from your own crew, Quintal replied. The same resources provided to previous rescue attempts. Jake looked at Ryan, who was still scribbling in his notebook. The engineer looked up and gave a slight nod, barely perceptible, but enough to indicate he had an idea. We accept the challenge, Jake announced. When do we leave? Immediately, Vextai said. The Alliance is eager to see whether human adaptability is genuine capability or merely theoretical potential. As they were escorted from the council chamber, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The challenge seemed designed to fail. 3 previous attempts by specialized teams had already established the problem's difficulty. But Ryan's confident expression suggested he had seen something the others had missed. Once again, Jake found himself trusting his engineer's exceptional mind and unique perspective. Please tell me you have a plan, Jake said quietly as they walked toward the docking bay. I have the beginning of one, Ryan replied, but it's going to require us to think about this problem in ways that none of the previous teams considered, such as... Ryan smiled for the first time since they had arrived at Aurora's edge. Such as what if the energy patterns aren't violating physical laws? What if they're following laws that none of these species understand yet? As they prepared to board their assigned scout ship, Jake realized that humanity's first real test in the galactic community wouldn't be about fitting into the Alliance's hierarchy. It would be about demonstrating that some problems required more than specialized expertise to solve. They needed human adaptability, creativity, and the unique ability to connect ideas across different domains of knowledge. If Ryan was right, they were about to prove that humans belonged in the galaxy not as subordinates, but as equals. The energy fields around the research station responded to their approach with patterns that seemed almost welcoming. Instead of the aggressive discharges reported by previous teams, the Meridian was greeted by gentle pulses of light that seemed to guide them toward a safe docking configuration. That's definitely not what happened to the other ships, Lisa observed, monitoring their instruments carefully. Ryan was practically vibrating with excitement as he tracked the energy patterns. It's because we're not approaching with predetermined assumptions. The station is reading our intentions and responding appropriately. Jake felt the ship's systems integrate smoothly with the research station's docking protocols. Whatever was controlling the energy fields was sophisticated enough to adapt to their ship's systems in real time. Life support is stable throughout the station, Lisa reported. Whatever happened here, the crew wasn't harmed by environmental factors. They made their way through the station's corridors, which were eerily quiet but showed no signs of damage or struggle. Emergency lighting provided adequate illumination, and the air recycling systems were functioning normally. This way, Ryan said, following readings on his portable scanner. I'm detecting concentrated energy signatures from a main laboratory. The laboratory was a marvel of multi-species cooperation. Equipment from a dozen different civilizations had been integrated into a seamless research environment. But it was what occupied the center of the room that took Jake's breath away. A three-dimensional display filled the space from floor to ceiling, but this wasn't like the Predator hierarchy back on Aurora's edge. This display was alive with flowing, organic patterns that seemed to shift and evolve even as they watched. Captain Morrison? A voice spoke from the shadows near the display. An alien figure stepped forward, tall and graceful, with the crystalline features of a crystal singer. But unlike Archivist Quintal back at the Alliance station, this being's crystal formations pulsed with inner light. I am Researcher Veltar, the alien continued. We have been hoping someone would come who could truly see what we have discovered. The Alliance sends to rescue you, Jake said carefully. They reported that your station went dark 3 months ago. Veltar's crystal features flickered with what might have been amusement. We are not in need of rescue, Captain. We chose to limit our communications with the Alliance when we realized the implications of our research. Lisa stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming diplomatic caution. What did you discover? Show them, Veltar. Another voice spoke from the other side of the laboratory. Jake turned to see a mixed group of aliens representing several different species. All of them looked healthy and alert, but there was something different about them. Their eyes held a clarity and depth that Jake hadn't seen in any of the Alliance members back at Aurora's edge. We discovered that the Predator hierarchy is not just wrong, Veltar explained, gesturing to the organic display. It is actively harmful to the development of galactic civilization. Ryan moved closer to the display, his engineer's mind immediately grasping its significance. This is a corrected model, isn't it? More than corrected, said another researcher, this one appearing to be from the same species as Ethereals, but moving with a vitality that Jake hadn't observed in Alliance Ethereals. This model shows what galactic civilization could become a species were allowed to develop according to their true nature rather than being forced into rigid hierarchical roles. The Alliance scout ship Meridian was sleek and efficient, designed for quick reconnaissance missions rather than comfort. Jake found himself cramped in the captain's chair, which had been built for the longer torso of a Zephyrian. Ryan was at the engineering station, his fingers dancing across controls that seemed to respond to his touch despite being calibrated for different alien physiologies. 2 hours to the Helix Nebula, Lisa reported from the science station. I'm reading the energy signatures that Archivist Quintal mentioned. They're unlike anything in our databases. Jake studied the tactical display, showing their destination. The research station appeared as a small, surrounded by swirling patterns of energy that seemed to shift and change even as they watched. Ryan, what's your initial assessment? The engineer was deep in concentration, cross-referencing the energy readings with his vast mental database of technical knowledge. The patterns are definitely artificial, but they don't match any known technology. More importantly, they seem to be responding to the presence of observer ships. Responding how? Each time a ship approaches, the energy field shift configuration. It's like the station is trying to communicate, but in a language none of the previous teams understood. Lisa looked up from her scanner readings. That's an interesting interpretation. The previous reports all described the energy discharges as defensive measures. Maybe they were, Ryan said thoughtfully. But what if they were also attempts at communication? What if the station was trying to tell the rescue teams something they weren't equipped to understand? Jake felt a familiar stirring of hope. Ryan's ability to see patterns that others missed had saved their lives more than once during their military service together. Explain your theory, Jake requested. Ryan pulled up the reports from all 3 previous rescue attempts and began highlighting specific details. Look at the timing of the energy discharges. The Krell team reported immediate hostility, but if you map out the discharge patterns, they follow a mathematical sequence. He showed them his analysis on the main screen. The Ethereal team got further because they tried to analyze the patterns, but they approached it as a purely intellectual puzzle. They missed the emotional component. Emotional component? Lisa asked. The energy fields aren't just mathematical. They're responding to the intentions and emotional states of the approaching teams. The Krell came ready for a fight, so the station defended itself. The Ethereals came as detached observers, so the station tried to engage them in increasingly complex puzzles until they became lost in the analysis. Jake was following Ryan's logic. And the Zephyrians? They approached with systematic protocols and rigid procedures. The station responded by creating equally rigid energy barriers that their systematic approach couldn't overcome. So what's our approach? Jake asked. Ryan was quiet for a long moment, his mind working through possibilities. We approach as humans, curious, adaptable, ready to communicate rather than conquer, analyze, or systematize. As they drew closer to the research station, the scope of the problem became more apparent. The entire structure was surrounded by layers of shifting energy fields that seemed to extend for thousands of kilometers in every direction. Previous scanner logs showed that these fields had grown more complex over time, as if learning from each encounter with Alliance ships. Captain, Lisa said urgently, I'm detecting life signs inside the station. The crew is still alive. Jake felt a surge of relief mixed with new concern. How many? Difficult to say precisely because of the energy interference, but at least a dozen individuals from various species. Then why haven't they responded to communication attempts? Ryan was studying the energy patterns with renewed intensity. Maybe they can't. Or Maybe they're trying to, but in a way the Alliance technology can't detect. Incoming transmission, Lisa announced. It's from Aurora's Edge. High Coordinator Vextai's face appeared on the main screen, his expression unreadable. Captain Morrison, our long-range sensors show you approaching the research station. What is your initial assessment? The display showed interconnected networks of cooperation and mutual development that were far more complex and dynamic than anything the hierarchy had revealed. Species weren't ranked against each other. They were shown as parts of a larger, evolving system where each civilization's unique strengths contributed to the growth of all others. The energy fields around the station, Jake realized. They're not defensive measures. They're a testing ground, Veltar confirmed. We've been developing new forms of communication and cooperation that transcend the limitations imposed by Alliance doctrine. The fields respond to the intentions and capabilities of approaching visitors. Ryan was studying the display with the intensity he usually reserved for technical problems. How long have you been working on this? The research began officially 6 months ago, replied what appeared to be a Krell, though this individual moved with a thoughtful precision that was unlike the aggressive warriors Jake had observed in the Alliance. But some of us have been questioning the hierarchy for decades. The Alliance Council knows, doesn't it? Lisa asked. They sent us here knowing what you discovered. Veltar's crystalline features darkened. The Council fears what we represent. A fundamental challenge to the system that has kept them in power for over a millennium. Jake was beginning to understand the full scope of what they had walked into. They didn't send us here to rescue you. They sent us here to test whether humans would join their rebellion or report back to the Alliance. Essentially, yes, Veltar agreed, though we prefer to think of it as evolution rather than rebellion. Ryan had been quiet during this exchange, but now he looked up from the display with an expression Jake had never seen before, a mixture of excitement and absolute certainty. I can fix it, Ryan said quietly. Fix what? Jake asked. The Predator hierarchy. I can see how to correct it based on what they've discovered here, combined with everything I memorized from the Alliance system. The research station crew exchanged glances of surprise and hope. Engineer Cole, Veltar said carefully, the hierarchy is protected by security systems that have never been penetrated. Even if you could access the core programming, altering it would require weeks of careful work by teams of specialists. Ryan was already moving toward the station's communication array. I don't need to access it physically. I have the entire structure memorized, along with its security protocols and operational patterns. He began working with the station's equipment, his fingers moving with the confident precision of someone who understood exactly what he was doing. Ryan, Jake said with growing alarm, what exactly are you planning? I'm going to recreate the entire Predator hierarchy from memory, but with the corrections these people have discovered. Then I'm going to broadcast it directly to Aurora's Edge during the Alliance Council's evaluation session. Lisa stared at him in disbelief. That's impossible. The amount of data involved is extensive but not beyond human memory capacity. Ryan interrupted, not pausing in his work. Especially not for someone who's been systematically memorizing technical systems his entire career. Jake watched his friend work with a mixture of pride and terror. What Ryan was proposing was audacious beyond belief. Reconstructing one of the galaxy's most sophisticated information systems from pure memory, while simultaneously correcting fundamental flaws that had persisted for centuries. Even if you can do this, Jake said, the Alliance won't just accept corrections to their most fundamental system. They'll see it as an attack. Then they'll have to choose, Ryan replied, his concentration never wavering from his work. Accept that their system is flawed and needs to change, or admit that they've been suppressing species development for their own benefit. Veltar moved closer to observe Ryan's work. He's actually doing it, the Crystal Singer said with amazement. He's reconstructing the entire hierarchy structure in real time. The display Ryan was creating on the research station systems was breathtaking in its complexity. Layer after layer of interconnected data flowed across the screens, showing not just species classifications, but the dynamic relationships between civilizations, the potential for cooperative development, and the tragic waste of forcing diverse species into narrow roles. How long until the Alliance expects our report? Ryan asked without looking up from his work. Jake checked the mission chronometer. 18 hours. Perfect. I'll need about 16 hours to complete the reconstruction and prepare for transmission. As Jake watched Ryan work, he realized they had passed the point of no return. Whatever happened next would determine not just humanity's place in the galactic community, but the future of every species that had been constrained by the Alliance's hierarchical thinking. Veltar, Jake said, I need to know something. If we do this, if we challenge the Alliance directly, what happens to all of us? The Crystal Singers features pulse with determined light. We find out whether the galaxy is ready for true cooperation, Captain Morrison, or we learn that some systems are too entrenched to change peacefully. Jake looked around at the research team that had risked everything to discover the truth, then at his own crew preparing to risk everything to share that truth with the galaxy. Then let's find out, he decided. Ryan, do what you need to do. We'll make sure you have the time to finish. As his engineer continued his unprecedented feat of memory and technical skill, Jake prepared himself for a confrontation that would either revolutionize galactic civilization or make humanity the Alliance's newest enemy. Jake stood on the bridge of the Meridian as they approached Aurora's edge for what might be the last time as welcome guests. Behind him, Ryan sat at the engineering station, his corrected version of the Predator hierarchy stored in the ship's computer systems and ready for transmission. The engineer looked exhausted but determined. 16 hours of continuous work had pushed even his exceptional abilities to their limits. Are you ready for this? Jake asked his crew. Lisa checked her scientific equipment one final time. The data is solid. Ryan's reconstruction is not only accurate, but demonstrates improvements that should be obvious to any objective observer. The question is whether we're dealing with objective observers. Ryan said quietly, the Alliance Council has a lot invested in maintaining the current system. Through the view screen, Aurora's edge looked the same as when they had first arrived. Massive, impressive, and intimidating. But Jake's perspective had changed completely. What had once seemed like the pinnacle of galactic civilization now looked like a monument to stagnation and control. Incoming transmission, Lisa reported. It's High Coordinator Vextai. The Zephyrian's face appeared on the main screen, his expression unreadable. Captain Morrison, you have returned precisely on schedule. The Alliance Council is prepared to hear your report on the research station incident. We're ready to present our findings, High Coordinator. Jake replied formally. Excellent. Proceed to Docking Bay 7 and prepare for immediate transport to the Council Chamber. The entire Alliance leadership is eager to learn whether humanity has successfully addressed a challenge that defeated 3 previous expeditions. The transmission ended, and Jake felt the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. In a few hours, they would either revolutionize galactic thinking or destroy humanity's chances of peaceful integration into the galactic community. Jake, Ryan said quietly, there's something you should know about what I discovered during the reconstruction. What is it? The hierarchy isn't just biased toward hierarchical thinking. It's been deliberately programmed to suppress any species that might challenge Zephyrian dominance. The whole system is designed to ensure that the Alliance never encounters a species that could offer genuine alternatives to their way of thinking. Lisa looked up from her station in surprise. You're saying the entire Alliance structure is a control mechanism? Not entirely, Ryan replied. I think it started as a genuine attempt to create galactic stability. But over centuries, it evolved into a system for maintaining Zephyrian power by preventing other species from reaching their full potential. Jake felt a chill run through him. So humanity isn't just challenging their assessment methods. We're challenging their entire power structure. Exactly. Which means they're not going to give up without a fight. The docking process proceeded normally, but Jake noticed increased security presence in the corridors as they made their way to the council chamber. Alliance guards from multiple species flanked their route, ostensibly ceremonial but clearly ready for trouble. The council chamber had been reconfigured since their last visit. Additional seating had been added for observers from species throughout the Alliance, creating an amphitheater effect that emphasized the formal nature of the proceedings. Jake realized this wasn't just an evaluation. It was a public demonstration designed to show the entire Alliance what happened to species that overestimated their abilities. High Coordinator Vextai stood as they entered the chamber. Captain Morrison, the Alliance Council recognizes humanity's attempt to address the research station crisis. Please present your findings. Jake stepped forward, acutely aware that hundreds of alien eyes were focused on him. High Coordinator, members of the Alliance Council, we successfully made contact with the research station and determined the cause of the communication breakdown. And that cause was... Vextai prompted. The research team discovered fundamental flaws in the Predator hierarchy that required them to develop alternative communication methods to protect their findings. A ripple of surprise and concern ran through the council chamber. This was clearly not the report the Alliance leadership had expected. You're claiming that our hierarchy contains errors? The question came from researcher Kilvan, his tone mixing curiosity with disbelief. Not errors in data collection, Jake replied carefully, but errors in fundamental assumptions about how species develop and interact. Vextai's expression hardened. Captain Morrison, the hierarchy has guided Alliance policy for over 12 centuries. Its accuracy has been proven through the successful integration of dozens of species. With respect, High Coordinator, success in integration might not be the same as success in development, Jake replied. The research team discovered that many species have capabilities and potential that the current hierarchy cannot recognize or measure. This is preposterous, declared a Krell representative. The hierarchy is based on objective analysis of species capabilities. It cannot be wrong about fundamental characteristics. Ryan stepped forward, his notebook in hand. If I may demonstrate, Honor Council members? Jake held his breath as Vextai considered the request. Finally, the High Coordinator gestured for Ryan to proceed. The current hierarchy operates on the assumption that species characteristics are fixed, Ryan began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber despite his obvious fatigue. But human analysis suggests that species are dynamic systems capable of transcending their initial parameters when given appropriate opportunities. He activated the chamber's display system and began uploading his reconstructed version of the hierarchy. The familiar three-dimensional structure began to take shape, but even from the first few moments, the differences were obvious. What you are seeing, Ryan continued as he worked, is a complete Predator hierarchy as recorded in Alliance databases, reconstructed from memory and cross-referenced with data from the research station. The chamber fell silent as alien representatives realized what they were witnessing. Ryan was recreating in perfect detail one of the most complex information systems in galactic history, without any access to the original data. Impossible, whispered someone in the crowd. No being has that kind of memory capacity. Humans do, Ryan said simply, continuing his work without pause. But more importantly, human memory works differently. We don't just store information. We form connections between different types of knowledge that allow us to see patterns others miss. As the reconstruction continued, the corrected elements began to appear. Species that had been classified as limited showed potential for dramatic development. Relationships between civilizations revealed opportunities for cooperation that the original hierarchy had completely missed. The research station team discovered that the Melody civilization didn't become dependent because of inherent weakness. Ryan explained as their data appeared in the display. They became dependent because they were never given opportunities to develop their natural strengths in conflict resolution and cultural synthesis. More examples followed. The quantum dancers hadn't been measurement anomalies. They had been demonstrating capabilities that the Alliance could have learned from instead of dismissing. The Synthesis Collective had shown a form of cooperation that could have revolutionized galactic society. Every species that the hierarchy classified as problematic was actually demonstrating evolutionary potential that challenged the system's fundamental assumptions, Ryan continued, his reconstruction now showing patterns of development and cooperation that painted a completely different picture of galactic civilization's potential. Vextai had been watching in stunned silence, but now he stood abruptly. Enough. You are deliberately distorting Alliance records to support unfounded theories about species development. I'm not distorting anything, Ryan replied calmly. I'm showing you what your own data reveals when it's analyzed without the assumption that hierarchical dominance is the natural order of intelligent life. The hierarchy has brought peace and stability to this sector for over a millennium. Vextai's composure was cracking under the pressure of seeing his life's work challenged so directly. It has brought stagnation, Jake interjected, stepping forward to support his engineer. Look at the data Ryan has presented. How many species have transcended their original classifications in the past 1,000 years? How many have been allowed to develop beyond the roles you assigned them? The silence in the chamber was deafening. Jake could see